What's up, YouTube? Back again with another video. We're gonna be reacting to infographics, Putin's fate if he loses the war in Ukraine. Try to gain some more knowledge on this war and try to learn some new stuff. Come right along with me. Let's get into it.
Since Russia invaded Ukraine, the war has not been going in Russia's favor. With over 100,000 casualties, thousands of destroyed vehicles, and punishing sanctions against the Russian economy, it's clear that Putin will not meet his war aim of denazifying Ukraine anytime soon. Either through an outright military defeat or humiliating peace, Russia will probably lose the war in Ukraine. But the question remains, what happens to Putin when he loses? The short answer is probably nothing. And here's why. The main reason why Putin will probably not be removed from power is that he is a ruthless statesman. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia faced a troubling and dramatic time during the 1990s. Marked by record unemployment, superinflation, and a massive crime wave, the fragile government of the 90s was dominated by a select few known as the oligarchs. The oligarchs were not necessarily from one region or family in Russia. Instead, the oligarchs were simply people who used existing Soviet connections to purchase state enterprises at ridiculously low prices or steal them outright. Every type of business you can imagine became private overnight, from oil and natural gas to rail networks, industrial factories, food manufacturers, and so on. These early opportunistic entrepreneurs used brute force, cunning trade relationships, and bribery to build their own monopolies within their respective industries. Because the oligarchs wielded so much power purely due to their money, the government under the leadership of Boris Yeltsin was powerless to oppose them. Instead, the government agreed to the oligarchs' demands as long as they funded campaigns of all of Yeltsin's cronies and helped keep the government afloat financially. One of the campaigns that the oligarchs supported was Putin's first presidential bid. Though famous in St. Petersburg at the time, Putin was an unknown figure on the national stage. With Boris Yeltsin's backing and the money from the oligarchs, Putin swept the 2000 presidential election as a veritable dark horse candidate. Shortly after winning the presidency, despite gleefully taking the oligarchs' money to support his campaign, Putin started his own campaign against the oligarchs as soon as he was sworn into power.
Damn, Putin's always been that way. That's crazy how he became the power and how they've just allowed him to just stay in power that way. That would be like Donald Trump getting elected and then just not leaving the White House. Like, that's crazy.
Tested the power the oligarchs yielded against the
That also shows you how corrupt Russia is.
government, and he sought to change that. In the summer of 2000, Putin summoned the 21 wealthiest oligarchs to Moscow to give them a personal message from him to tell all the others. During that closed-door meeting, Putin made it abundantly clear that the oligarchs now only existed because he allowed them to do so. Putin allegedly told them that as long as none of them opposed his will, sought any political aspirations, or in no way challenged what he was going to do, he would let them continue living their life of luxury. If they stepped out of line, he would personally see to it that they were made penniless, thrown in jail, or killed. Not long after the meeting, Putin was put...
Yeah, that's fucked up. See, and that's what I'm saying. Like, he's saying he don't think anything's gonna happen to Putin. I actually think the opposite. I actually believe the theory that Putin's actually sick. So, I don't know. We'll see, though. He ain't out of power. That's all I know.
to the test when an oligarch that ran the first independent newspaper in Russia started mocking him on a television series he was running. Shortly after airing the first episode, the oligarch was arrested for defrauding the government of $10 million, thrown in prison, and his company sold to a Putin ally for pennies on the dollar. Putin would continue pursuing oligarchs throughout the next 20 years. Putin has jailed or murdered numerous oligarchs since 2000, but his persecution of them has ramped up exponentially since the invasion. Since February 2022, at least 10 oligarchs have been murdered or found dead under mysterious circumstances. Though each case was different, one commonality linking them was their outspoken criticism of Putin and the war. So if the oligarchs, supposedly people with all the money and power in Russia, can't or won't do anything, then who could? The only other entity that could challenge Putin is a group called the Siloviki. Coined about 10 years ago, the term Siloviki means men of force and refers to the group of Putin allies that help him run the country. Once Putin made it clear that the oligarchs would not lord over him, he created a fiercely loyal group of oligarchs directly answerable to him. Since 2000, Putin has been steadily growing his list of trusted confidants that he personally selects. Each of these hand-picked men is given a lucrative business to run. Most of these businesses have deep ties to state-ordered contracts, and his cronies and their families have become incredibly wealthy from those relationships. Though the Siloviki lord over their own domains in Russia, they have a few commonalities. Firstly, almost all these men have experience either in the military, police forces, or intelligence services of either the USSR or Russia. Those who do not have this experience have been stalwart allies.
They're gonna definitely backdoor him. At some point in time, that war, I mean, becomes too costly. Like it really does for the society, for Russia, for the amount of time and money and the generations of human beings that are being slaughtered profusely. Like, it's not, I mean, they've, if I'm not mistaken, last time I looked, they've already hit almost COVID numbers with the amount of deaths in this war. And like I said, this war, you know, people are going to die in a war, but it's like a war that well, I don't know if it's for no reason. Again, I'm not from Russia. I don't know their political views or what they think about on Ukraine. From the outside looking in, I feel like it was for no reason. That's my opinion. But yeah, I just went off on a little bit of a rant there. I apologize.
Of Putin, who served with him early on in his political career. Regardless of their backgrounds, they each share an undying loyalty to Putin. It is this loyalty that allows them to be close to him. Though the number of Russian oligarchs is around 400 to 1,000, the number of Siloviki is only around a dozen. Because it's such an exclusive club, the barriers to entry are high. People like Ramzan Kadyrov, the leader of the Chechen Republic, and Yevgeny Prigozhin, known as Putin's chef and the de facto leader of the paramilitary Wagner Group, desire to be in this club, but so far haven't made the cut. When news media talks about people like Ramzan Kadyrov and Yevgeny Prigozhin, they often talk about them as if they're vying to set themselves up to be the future president of Russia. But what they don't understand about the Siloviki is that they too only exist because Putin allows them to. Unlike the oligarchs, the Siloviki are granted audiences with Putin where they can advise him and address their concerns. But what they cannot do is ever challenge his authority. Because of this dynamic, the Siloviki would require an almost unanimous consensus among them to overthrow Putin. It could be possible, since with their cumulative connections in the military, police, and business sectors, they could get away with it. However, this would be unlikely given that some have been staunch Putin supporters literally since Putin's childhood. So, even if the Siloviki would not overthrow Putin, what about the Russian people? After all, with almost 150 million residents, the Russian people far outnumber the dozen or so cronies controlling the country. But going back to Putin being a ruthless statesman, even a popular uprising is unlikely. There's been some very vocal public opposition against Putin, from mass demonstrations in the streets to even shootings at recruitment offices, combined with the mass exodus of hundreds of thousands of Russian men avoiding the draft. However, as one activist has put it, Putin's regime is better at cracking down on protests than they are at organizing them. For example, Putin's security forces have arrested thousands of protesters. These protesters have faced indescribably inhumane treatment while in custody. But what is even worse than their treatment is what...
Let's just say I'm glad I live in America. The way they get treated over there, and like even now, like where they got, you ain't allowed to challenge, do that. What? Bro, there's people every day that say Joe Biden's an idiot. Like, you know what I mean? Like, this is crazy. And they ain't going to jail for that. I mean, shit, I don't know. Maybe you say too much, maybe they'd come get you.
What happens to them afterward? Many arrested protesters reported that instead of court summons, they were handed draft notices and inducted into the army. This forceful conscription has deterred many from protesting. And at the border checkpoints, when Russian men were fleeing by the thousands, the Russian...
Dude, This man just said that they were arresting people who were protesting the war, and instead of taking them to jail, was taking them to the fucking front lines of the war. That's disgusting. And I'm gonna be honest, no wonder why they ain't getting nowhere, because half them people that are fighting for Russia don't even want to be there.
Russian military simply set up enlistment offices and handed out draft notices before men could cross the border. These actions and more have stifled resistance among the minority of people actively opposed to Putin and denied a voice to the silent majority. According to most political analysts, Russia has three distinct groups of people. Some actively resist the war, some are staunchly pro-war, and then there is the silent majority. The silent majority is a holdover from the Soviet era, where their parents and grandparents would tell them that everything would be all right as long as there is no war. This group of people, though research has shown that if given a choice generally do not approve of Putin, would never make these statements publicly, even to their friends and family. Instead, the vast majority of Russia's population chooses to remain apolitical as long as the war does not affect.
Let me put this in, I don't mean to keep pausing it, but let me put this in perspective. Let's just say you tell your mom Joe Biden sucks and you can't stand him. And she go, because of how scared people are of going to jail and Putin and the way things work over there, goes and tells on you and you go to jail or go to the front lines. Just be glad you live in America, because things could always be worse. And you gotta understand, there's countries that are worse than this. Way worse than this. I mean, fuck, you seen Afghanistan?
Affect them. Putin is doing everything he can to do just that. For example, Putin called up 300,000 men in his partial mobilization back in September. While the pictures and videos of distraught men being forced to say goodbye to loved ones rippled throughout Russian media, something more tragic has not made any waves at all. The so-called Russian oblasts of the Donetsk People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic have forcibly mobilized the same number of personnel from a total population of about 41 times smaller than Russia's. Evidence shows that 140,000 men from these two areas have already been drafted by June. By December, it's estimated to now be double that number, and these figures do not even include the thousands of Ukrainians forcibly enlisted in southern Ukraine. In the Donbass, roving patrols of soldiers kidnap all able.
And now they're taking Ukrainians and making them their soldiers. What, bro? And they're still, hold on, let me explain this to you. And they're still not winning the war. Still. Look at all these, that is, I don't, like I said, war is horrible. It's terrible. I don't wish that on nobody, no person, no human being. I know plenty of people that were in the army. I have plenty of family that's in the army, and or Marines, and it's just, I couldn't imagine. I couldn't. The kind of conditions you have to live in order to go through that. No way, man. No way at all. I mean, that's kind of weird, though, because I always wanted to be in the army when I grew up. However, they wouldn't take me, so whatever.
Bodied men aged 18 to 60 to serve in the army. In fact, the numbers are so huge that the economies in the rear areas no longer function, mostly because no people are left to work. It's this type of all-encompassing general mobilization that Putin does not want Russians to experience because of the huge public backlash he would receive from the silent majority. Another way he's avoiding backlash is by forcibly enlisting immigrants and those from the economically depressed areas. In Russia, there are millions of mostly single Central Asian men who have come to Russia legally to work, and they often send their money home and frequently travel to see their families. Since the war started, Russian army officials have been forcing these men to sign enlistment contracts by telling them that they'd have problems with immigration authorities if they refused. Leaked evidence appears to support this theory. In the spring, documents obtained by an independent news outlet showed the names and home addresses of 120,000.
They are taking people who are there that aren't Russian citizens. So if you are not a Russian citizen and you are going to Russia, good luck. Good luck. Like, they are taking non-Russian citizens and making them enlist into the war. Like, he's making everybody short of himself and his family.
1,000 personnel serving in Ukraine. Many of these men had last names and home addresses from Central Asian countries like Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and Kazakhstan. Since the war started, more studies have proved that mobilization efforts target poorer communities in Russia. Frequently, oblasts in eastern and southern Russia face per capita mobilization rates 10 to 50 times greater than places like Moscow, which is a hotbed of Putin support. Because most Putin supporters are middle class and higher, Putin's forced generation efforts disproportionately target areas where he is not as popular, thereby keeping his supporters loyal. However, despite racial profiling and discrimination, some communities have embraced this opportunity to increase their standing with Putin. Dagestan, the Muslim-majority republic in the Caucasus, has had rocky relations with Moscow due to decades of Islamic extremism in the region. Local leaders see the war as an opportunity to provide huge numbers of personnel to get political favors with Putin. These communities have become Putin supporters as a way to secure more financial aid and lessen Moscow's grip on local politics. Another factor that keeps the silent majority silent is the lackluster results of the sanctions on the Russian economy. Over 1,000 Western businesses have left Russia, and that number grows every day. But despite this, the Russian economy is only expected to retract about 4% this year, far less than Western analysts had hoped. Because of
that is a crazy ass statistic. That is crazy. That is a crazy ass statistic right there. They're only all them businesses leaving there, all the sanctions that we've put on them, and they're only dropping 4%. Which is a lot, don't get me wrong, when it comes to billions and billions and billions of dollars, but 4% ain't shit compared to what they thought it was going to do.
this, though consumers are slightly annoyed because they have fewer options to choose from, there are still plenty of options in large population centers. With increased salaries from state-owned corporations, Putin has done much to ensure his supporters are taken care of. However, these sanctions are hitting Russians harder in rural areas where most of his army hails from. With already depressed wages, the price increases on the available everyday products have hit the wallets of many less economically fortunate Russians. With few state jobs in those areas, these people have seen their buying power plummet. But despite this, they hunker down and endure the storm because of the prevalent Soviet mindset that is stuck around in the Russian countryside. Even though a regime change in Russia is very unlikely, it could still happen. The more likely scenario would be a silent coup from the Siloviki. Up for re-election in 2024, Putin could be forced by this group to not seek re-election. In exchange, Putin and his family would be guaranteed to live out their days in comfort with the estimated $200 billion worth of wealth he personally holds. On the other hand, the much more dramatic scenario would be his forced departure from Russia. One of his closest political aides, who was also his speechwriter, claims that Putin's bailout plan, should everything go south, is to flee to a country like Venezuela. In a dictatorship, Putin would be guaranteed safety and freedom of movement for the rest of his days, while still enjoying his vast wealth. As far as a bloody revolution or an assassination, chances of this happening are virtually zero, while a silent coup could be possible, especially if Putin escalates the war beyond what it already is. Killing him is out of the question. The opposition is too closely monitored to conduct such an act, and he has too many protections in place from his pro-war hawks, and the silent majority is too afraid to do anything to disturb their quality of life. Now watch Ukraine's plan to win the war, or check out why.
That's crazy. That's crazy that's how they really live over there. I always heard, things here, things there. But that is really crazy that's how they live over there. Can't say nothing, no freedom of speech. You can't. What? That's like, dude, all them people that hated Trump would have been in jail. Or in the army. All the people that would hate Biden would be in the jail or in the army. Like, that's crazy. Hey, just be thankful you live in America. That was infographics on Putin's fate if he loses the war in Ukraine. I actually disagree with him though, with his like overall like, because I do believe something, if he loses the war, something will happen as far as him no longer being in power. But I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Make sure y'all drop a like, sub if you enjoyed it. Catch y'all next time. Thank y'all.